Hello, everyone. How are you all doing? Not good, huh? All right, awesome. Well, let's dive right in. Well, maybe not. Let's see here. Now, for some reason, I've lost AV. It could be me, could be you. Talk amongst yourselves. Yeah, I think they're fixing it back there, so we'll give them a minute. Ah, there we are. All right. Cool. I'm not sure. Well, you know what? Let's just start it right over. All right. Forgive the technical difficulties, everyone. Let's dive right in now. Okay, so I know that may have been confusing or uncomfortable for some of us, but the point that I wanted to make is that we've all already very deeply integrated technology into our lives. So with that, let's get into introductions. My name is Emily Rose. You can and should follow me on Twitter at @nexulove. I'm a developer evangelist at SalesForce, previously at a company called Particle. And I like to start all my presentations with just a brief introduction. So here's what I like to call 5 fun facts for free about me. My preferred pronouns are plural they, so figure that one out. And I'm an artist masquerading as a developer. I'm an IoT and ubiquitous computing enthusiast. I'm also one of the nicest people you'll ever meet. And I'm from Portland, Oregon, which probably explains a lot. And the title of my talk, as mentioned, is The Future is Now, Realizing Your Potential as a Cyborg. And just a real quick warning, this talk is about to get deep, like #deep. There's no code demos, nothing technical in this talk. I won't be offended if this doesn't interest you, but I just want to set the expectation. This is a talk really focused on kind of the thoughts and the feelings and the overall kind of goals of our community at large. So before we jump into that, I'd like to start off with some fun internet facts. So in 2013, it was interesting to note that an estimated 51% of internet traffic was non-human in nature. And this was, this is pretty significant. It was the first time that happened. And the data is actually, it's a little hazy, but probably not terribly inaccurate. And just to clarify, non-human traffic is traffic that is not originating from like a real person sitting at a system doing something right in that moment. So the SEO industry has a term for that. It's called NHT, or non-human traffic. And this can be traffic generated by crawlers or malicious programs like the Mirai botnet, or really just anything that is not the direct result of a human. So webcams, light bulbs, anything. And in 2014, that estimate rose 10%. And so, it's safe to say that a fairly significant portion of the traffic is non-human in nature. So let's do a little bit of linear extrapolation for science's sake. And keep in mind, I'm not a data scientist, but I can make really pretty graphs in Keynote, which is almost the same. So here's an extremely scientific graph. And as you can see, even with the erroneous assumption that the growth in non-human traffic is completely linear, by 2018, over 101% of the total internet traffic will be non-human in nature. How about that? Interesting. But we expect exponential growth of non-human traffic. So what would that look like? Well, I have an obscenely scientific graph for you. And it might look nothing like this, but the truth will really be stranger than fiction. But the interesting thing to note here is that By the year 2020, an estimated over 9,000% of the internet's total traffic will be non-human in nature, statistically speaking, right? Think about how much that really is. Like, that's like 90 whole pie charts, right? Like, I couldn't even fit them on a single slide, so that's why I had to use a bar graph. But anyway, like I said, the real figures are much more impressive than bogus statistics, and a lot of really, big names in the space are making some very bold claims. Things like 50 billion devices online by the year 2020. All right, that's like, do the math, that's like 50 devices for every person living in San Francisco, right? And like, this is Cisco saying this, right? So they know what they're talking about. So what we know is that the data is flowing, right? And will continue to do so as more and more devices come online. But where is it coming from? Where is all of this new influx in data coming from? Is it that many new exploits and DOS attacks? No. The answer is literally everywhere. And literally more of everywhere every single day, right? Every single day, more sensors are coming online. And new systems are collecting data that they haven't collected before, and existing systems are adding in new sensors. And like I said, literally everything, literally. But what does it represent? That's the important thing, right? What does all that data represent? You might know what I'm going to say. Literally everything, right? From credit card activity to transit usage, temperature readings, seismological events, gas emissions. That was me, by the way. Excuse me. Everything from like air and water quality to the toastedness of your toasts, your health, your daily activities, your whereabouts. Everything from that to the overall status of the world at large. But more importantly, literally everyone, because all of that data really represents us, right? It'd be meaningless without people. And literally more of everyone every single day, right? Every single day, novel sensors, new kinds of data, systems being brought online. Figuratively speaking, of course. Maybe not every day, but you get my point. Hyperbole is one of my superpowers, so please respect that. Let's move on. This is my first and only quote in my talk, so I hope you appreciate it. Speaking of superpowers, the great David Bowie. Homo sapiens have outgrown their use. Got to make way for the Homo superior. And what I mean by that is that humanity has the opportunity to level up and gain new superpowers. And maybe not in the comic book anti-hero sense, but we have very real opportunities to improve the everyday quality of our life and our safety and the distribution of knowledge and other resources through the responsible and intelligent distribution of meaningful data. But a real quick aside about non-human data, I believe that is the wrong way to look at this concept because we are our data. We are. So, show of hands, who's up for a quick thought experiment? Cool, all right, so at least half of us. All right, imagine with me, if you will, just for a moment, that this space, or this space, whichever you prefer, but this space is filled with all the content that you've ever generated on every social media site that you've ever encountered, right? So what is that? Like every Facebook post, every tweet, every snarky Reddit comment, every hilarious image macro, every selfie and blog post and all the source code that you've ever written. So just envision it. I'll give you a minute. I just realized there's water here, so it's a good time. So, like I said, the point I'm trying to make is that you are your data. You're the content that you create. When you die, your personhood continues to exist in the form of your data. And people will post on your Facebook page, and it'll become a memorial. And machine learning already allows us to create a semi-reasonable facsimile of your personality just by analyzing existing content. So what does this tell us about what it might mean to be alive in the year 2020? So the assertion that I make here is that the internet is now a conduit for the expansion of human consciousness itself, right? And the state of our consciousness is also changing. And we're a lot more than we used to be, right? So we're literally enhancing our own senses at this point, right? So some examples: push notifications on your phone when your Nest cameras detect motion at home, right? That's ESP. And GPS-enabled applications that alert you to emergent traffic conditions before you get there. Yeah, you got precognition now. Cool. So you're seeing the future by way of technology. And we're really creating new depths of awareness and quantifying our existence in entirely new ways. So we've got fitness trackers. How many of you have a fitness tracker on right now? Yeah, again, probably maybe half, a third. So we've got fitness trackers, we've got internet radio that catalogs, all of our listening moods, and we check in on Swarm, reveals a lot about our lifestyle. We use ride-sharing applications, that track our detailed routes and all of that. So again, the point I'm trying to make here is that we can now understand and interact with each other and ourselves in new ways. And these are just a few examples. There's a lot out there. But, at this point, you're probably asking yourself, where am I going with this? What's your point? And this is where I respond with story time. So back at NodeConf US 2015, which is a conference up in the woods in Marin County, California, about 2 hours north of San Francisco. Again, show of hands, how many of you are familiar with NodeConf US? Some of us? Okay, cool. So just to set the stage, a lot of us were chatting in a tree, actually, outside, and just talking about random, nerdy things that interest us. And a gentleman by the name of Miles Borens, or the Alpha Nerd, had mentioned a concept, just in passing, kind of a joke, but it really stuck with me. And that concept was the cuddle-based economy, right? And he didn't really, I don't think he was thinking too seriously about it, but we're just kind of chit-chatting, and it seemed like a cute idea, and we giggled about it, and we moved on. But like I said, I really couldn't shake the idea. So a year later, this is still on my mind, and I'm thinking about it a lot, and I can't get it out of my head. I'm like, what would that look like? Could it work? How? What would it take culturally or technologically? So here we are at NodeConf US 2016. And we have an unconf style of conference this year. So there's no predefined sessions or speakers. Everyone just gets in front of a whiteboard and suggests different topics and locations where you would discuss it. And then interested parties just show up, and you have a chat. So I got up there, and I was like, why not? Cuddle-based economy. And I figured maybe a couple people would remember the joke, and we'd have a little laugh, and we'd reminisce maybe, and that would be it. But I was wrong. I think 20 to 30 people showed up on the first session, and I was really surprised. I was imagining that I was just just my crazy idea, right? But people really loved the idea, and we had some really deep and meaningful discussions. People were sharing things about themselves that you typically wouldn't expect someone to share at a developer conference. Concepts were discussed, and we started talking about implementation details, which quickly evolved the concept. We realized very quickly that the idea has a lot more potential than simply referring to it as an economy. But maybe we could build this into a platform or a network of the future. And so after our first session, it was time to propose more sessions. So I got back up there and used what we had discussed to propose a second session, which was the Crypto-Cuddle revolution. And this was where we realized that people were actually serious about this subject, and the discussion focused on identifying ways that we could build a system like this and how it would need to function in order for it to be successful. So we talked about using the blockchain, or maybe we build an app, or how would we interact with each other through the platform, or would we even? And what would the intention be exactly? What's the purpose of this? And I think the intent that we came up with, the kind of the core concept that we agreed upon, was this idea of how we can use technology, our unprecedented access to information and cutting edge technology, to actually codify and teach empathy, and help improve the condition of our social relations. And so the hypothesis was that empathy is like a muscle. And It's learned over time, and it must be practiced and exercised. But if it is, you get better at it, and more exercise is more capacity. It's only through that exercise that we begin to strengthen our ability to empathize with others and increase our capacity for compassion, and more exposure is more exercise. It's only through that new exposure to new individuals and customs and cultures that we can continually exercise that capacity. But we realized also that that isn't really enough. And there was a lot of musing about this. What else is necessary? And this is where I depart a little bit from kind of what we had discussed at NodeConf US. This is kind of me just thinking out loud, I guess, so to speak. But to add to that hypothesis, I believe that we can't stop at empathy. It's not enough to get us where we want to go. And I think the assertion really is that we must redefine ourselves if we're going to be successful, if we're going to reach new levels of compassion. We're still constrained by our current understanding of what it means to be human. So we must redefine ourselves completely. What would that look like? What if we completely re-examined our definition of humanity? And so the assertion that I make at this point is that if we are to survive, we must intentionally evolve. Because like I said, empathy alone is not enough to get us where we want to go. So my point really is that we're all cyborgs. And maybe I haven't convinced you just yet, but I hope that I've given you at least some things to think about. And I want to leave you, I guess, with a few things, a couple questions, and a poem that I wrote. And to explain the poem, I don't normally write poetry. I don't consider myself a poet. But I had the opportunity to serve as the master of ceremony for a couple conferences in Europe last year and earlier this year. And I was asked by one of the speakers to write a poem for him. And so I ended up getting in this mode of writing poems for people while they were performing, while they were doing their talk, and then reciting the poem to them after they were done, while the next speaker was getting set up. And so I was like, why not? I'll take a stab at writing a poem about what I'm trying to discuss here. So now that I've clarified that, I'd like to leave you with my two questions, and that is, what is our potential? And how might it be realized? And with that, poetry time. I've got about 2 minutes left, so I'm going to try not to rush, but it's a doozy, so here we go. Are you one who explores beyond the shores of social mores? Will you delve into the ocean of human emotion, let loose your soul and drink the love potion? The choices to make, will you give or will you take? Then will you help to awaken the next generation, a technocratic nation, one crafted with elation, for we are the ones who must build the foundation. Now is the time, find your reason and rhyme. This is the season to break free from thought crime. Let your voices rise up, persist, and don't falter. Be rid of your vices from years at the altar of deities false and dogmas of yore. We shall simply abide by this bondage no more. We must forge a weapon against the procession of intolerance wrought through violent oppression. It is not a question of whether we can, but a matter of how we approach with a plan. Let us form a framework for a new manner of thought, a system in which empathy can be taught. No longer shall judgment lurk in our midst. By way of technology, our biases dismissed. So this is the moment where I shall insist the path that we've chosen means we must enlist. We can create a community where we all coexist, but for us to do this, we all must assist. Wielding the keyboard, unyielding, it's only through cohesion we find healing. With new systems we can begin revealing all the ways these warlords keep us reeling. On all of us, a dossier, their politics leading astray, their promises broken by election day. So just how do we adequately convey our utter disappointment, disgust, and dismay? We pave the way. We build the engine, technology with the intention to aid in our ascension into a new age, one free of contention. With a newfound gauge for shared comprehension, we watch as the world enters into our dimension. Now we take control and change our direction. We can fight the infection and repair our connection. We strive for perfection through our collective introspection. It will be through our rejection of the previous perception that our greatest gift is bestowed. A download Yes, diodes and transistors, but much more than that, my brothers and sisters, when they look back on this digital crossroad and ask to whom their lives are owed, they'll see just what we sowed. We spoke truth not through riots or a malicious payload, but with our source code, for it was from our fight. It was our fight from whence the future flowed. Thank you. Help us.